Midnight, July 5, 1942. The Bay of Biscay is completely swallowed by darkness. Beneath the churning Atlantic, an Axis submarine breaches the surface. German and Italian sailors flood the wet deck, greedily inhaling the diesel-choked air. To these notorious U-boat hunters, the pitch-black night is their ultimate armor. As long as the sun remains hidden, they are the undisputed masters of the ocean, yet thousands of feet above. A British Royal Air for Swellington bomber circles silently in the heavy clouds. It is a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Suddenly, the radar operator's voice shatters the silence target acquired. The bomber plunges toward the invisible ocean. But just as they close in on the final mile, the exact moment precision means life or death, the radar screen erupts into static. A snowy blur of sea clutter. They are utterly blind. Down below, the submarine crew smokes and laughs, oblivious to the bomber. Roaring engines masked by the crashing waves. They have no idea the Grim Reaper is hovering inches from their necks. Then, without a microsecond of warning, the ink-black sky violently erupts. A blinding, pure white fury of 22 million. Candelooper ignites the heavens. It is a broadsword of raw energy cleaving through the fog, pinning the pale hull against the sea. The sailors' retinas are subjected to a catastrophic assault, their vision burned into a void of searing white before their screams. Of panic can even escape, a barrage of depth charges rains down like a meteor shower. Geysers of water blast into the air. Steel shrieks and tears. In 3 seconds, the absolute predator becomes the helpless prey. Would you believe the core of this weapon? A device that wiped out the invincible U-boat fleet and saved over 400,000 lives was an ordinary car headlight, salvaged from a junkyard and strapped to a metal trash can. Even more absurd when this concept was first proposed. Britain's top physicists arrogantly declared it scientifically impossible. To understand this miracle, rewind to the bleak winter of 1940. The British Empire stands alone. Its lifeline is the Atlantic shipping lanes. Adolf Hitler and his commander, Karl Dönitz, know exactly where to twist the knife, unleashing the terrifying Wolfpack. Hundreds of German U-boats lurk in the abyss. By day, they listen. By night, they surface, using total darkness to slaughter Allied supply ships. Britain is starving. Officially calculated to be just 12 weeks away from irreversible collapse. Winston Churchill later admits the U-boat peril is the only thing that truly frightened him during the war. Desperate, the Royal Air Force deploys the ASV ARC to airborne radar. It can detect a surfaced submarine from miles away, but it has a soul-crushing flaw at a distance of under 1 mile. The final 30 seconds of the attack run the radar waves bounce off the chaotic ocean surface. The screen whites out. For the most critical 30 seconds of the mission, the pilots are plunged into terrifying blindness, forced to visually locate a gray submarine in pitch-black turbulence. To fix this, the RAF tries dropping blinding magnesium flares, but flares take 18 seconds to ignite, plenty of time for U-boats to crash dive. Worse, the flare's explosion acts like a flashbang. To the British pilots, temporarily blinded, some lose control and crash directly into the freezing Atlantic in the first 2 years of the war. Coastal Command fails to sink a single German submarine at night. Enter Wink, Commander Humphrey de Verd Leigh. Leigh isn't a legendary Spitfire race. He is a 44-year-old administrative officer buried in logistics reports. But Leigh has a secret. He flew suicidal maritime patrols during World War I. He knows the bone-chilling isolation of hunting a speck in a freezing ocean. He refuses to bow to the elegant physics equations of Cambridge scientists that can't save drowning sailors. Sitting in a suffocating briefing where engineers declare the final visual gap impossible. To bridge, inspiration strikes Leigh. If dropping flares is to slow and blinds the pilots, why not strap a massively powerful searchlight directly to the bomber's belly? The plane stalks the sub by radar. When the radar drops out, the pilot flips a switch. A monstrous light drops from the fuselage, pinning the sub in a pillar of fire. The pilot gets daytime visibility. The Germans get instantly blinded. Leigh drafts the blueprints and submits them to the Air Ministry. The response: merciless mockery. The Oxford and Cambridge physicists treat him like a child. They list 3 unbreakable laws of physics forbidding it. First, power illuminating a sub from 2,000 feet requires astronomical amperage the bomber can't generate. Second, aerodynamics loading heavy batteries would ground the plane, and dangling a searchlight would cause fatal drag. Finally, optics igniting a multi-million cantilever light in the dark sky would refract off the moisture in cockpit canopy, instantly blinding the pilot and causing a fatal crash. The project is rejected as a lethal hazard, but Leigh walks out of that room. Not with defeat, but with an inferno of rage. He decides to build it himself. In an abandoned shed, Leigh strips off his uniform and goes to work. His supply chain is the local scrapyard. He finds a massive headlamp from a heavy-duty lorry, modifying the filament and hand-polishing a parabolic reflector to focus every photon into a lethal beam to solve aerodynamic drag. He uses an ordinary collapsible metal trash can. He stuffs the lorry headlight inside and engineers a crude winch system. The light stays retracted inside the bomber's belly during flight, dropping down only in the final seconds of the attack. To solve the impossible power constraints, Leigh realizes the light doesn't need a continuous generator. It only needs to burn. Like a dying supernova for 30 seconds, he wires together heavy, discarded lead-acid batteries, placing them directly over the bomber's center of gravity so the engines can handle the load, to prevent the light from blinding the pilot. He uses simple, brute force mechanical logic. He wires a fail-safe switch. The circuit only connects when the canister is fully extended below the fuselage, physically blocked by the aircraft's floorboards and entirely out of the pilot's line of sight. By March 1941, the Leigh light is born. He bullies a Royal Navy commander into a field test on a moonless night. Leigh flies an obsolete biplane over a target ship. He yanks the deployment lever, a solid pillar of searing white light. Punches through the fog, turning the ocean into high noon. The target is illuminated in microscopic detail, and not a single photon leaks into the cockpit. The test is a reality-shattering success. Yet, the Air Ministry refuses to apologize. Driven by pure arrogance, the High Command officially reprimands Leigh for unauthorized modification of military hardware. They threaten him with a court-martial if he continues his dead-end project. The weapon that could end the slaughter is locked in a filing cabinet to protect bureaucratic egos. Leigh paces the halls for months, enduring sneers, repeating his plea. Just give me one airplane, and I will light up the Atlantic. Finally, Air Chief Marshal Philip Yaubert takes over Coastal Command. A warrior of ruthless efficiency, Yaubert reviews the rejected proposals. He sees the Leigh light not as a flashlight, but as a guillotine for the Wolfpack. Furious at the bureaucracy, Yaubert bypasses the ministry, assigns an elite squadron of Wellingtons to Leigh, and orders the lights installed immediately. The climax arrives on July 5, 1942. Squadron leader Jefferson Howell pilots a Wellington bomber at 3,000 feet below the massive Italian submarine. Luigi Torelli surfaces to charge its batteries. The bomber dives in silence. At 1 mile out, the radar drops. Howell grips the yoke, his thumb on a red button. At 200 feet, he presses it. 22 million cantilever of unadulterated white fury tears away the night. The beam strikes the submarine. The Axis sailors' brains short-circuit under the apocalyptic glare. They collapse, clutching their burning eyes, completely defenseless before the executioner. Howell's vision is crystal clear. 6 massive depth charges plummet from the bomb bay, riding the shaft of light directly onto the target. The cataclysmic shockwaves rip the ocean apart. The submarine's pressure hull splits open, belching black smoke. the invincible killer sinks into the absolute darkness. It is the opening act of an unprecedented slaughter. The Bay of Biscay transforms into a brutal battlefield every night. U-boats breaching the surface are met with a terrifying white flash and a barrage of explosives. The psychological devastation is absolute. German commanders panic, unable to fathom how the British hunt them without warning. Within a single month, coastal command sinks more German submarines than in the previous 2 years combined. Facing total annihilation, Karl Dönitz issues a disastrous order: no U-boat is permitted to surface at night. Terrified of the mysterious night sun, he forces his sluggish submarines into the glaring light of day, completely exposed to overwhelming Allied air superiority. With that single order, the coffin of the U-boat fleet is nailed shut. A junkyard invention declared physically impossible sends over 200 U-boats to the bottom of the ocean and saves 400,000 lives. Yet, when the world celebrates the victory, Wing Commander Humphrey de Verd Leigh receives no public medals. To keep the technology from the Germans, the Leigh Light is classified as an ultra-top secret weapon until 1946. The bureaucrats who mocked him so cup the glory, attributing the triumph to the Air Ministry's collective genius. Leigh never complains. He demands no parades. Like his searchlight, he burns brightly in the dark and quietly retracts into the shadows, retiring in 1962. Years later, when the Royal Air Force Museum dedicates an exhibition to his invention, the curator asks for a quote. The stubborn old veteran smiles and says the device worked not because of his brilliant design, but because the brave boys of the Royal Air Force flew it. "Oh, tell the stories of those men fighting death in the dark," he insists. "Don't tell mine." Today, that rugged contraption of rusty wires and a metal cylinder sits in silence, screaming a universal truth: never let the experts tell you your vision is impossible. When the world plunges into darkness, the most elegant equations are no match for the raw courage of a single human being willing to break the rules. If you want more hardcore breakdowns of history's deadliest military inventions, smash that like button and subscribe. I am your tactical observer. I will see you on the next battlefield.